good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Ham Radio Basics Live, Season 2, Episode 33, Ham Radio Prep Emergency Communications 101 with our very special guest, Jim Reed from Ham Radio Prep. Jim, welcome. Thanks for
Hi.
stopping today.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate it. Good to be on.
And I got to say, I absolutely, you know what, James couldn't have picked somebody more perfect than you for your coursework. I'll tell you what, it's you have a great voice, number one, okay, and number two, just you fit. It's just like very welcoming, and it's just I just love the whole thing about it. And James and I were on for an hour last year, and I told when I had him on, and I said, you know what, we could have easily gone 2 or 3 because I just enjoyed the talk so much. And we're here to talk today about a brand new course that's offered by Ham Radio Prep. It's called Emergency Communications 101, and that's what we brought Jim in for. But Jim, if you could just real briefly give us a background about things and how you ended up coming on board with Ham Radio Prep and everything, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to. So, and thank you very much for the kind words. I appreciate it. I retired from corporate life. I like to say it wasn't a golden parachute, but it was a silver parachute. So I retired from corporate life about 4 years ago and was doing, and then, a month after I retired, COVID hit. So I was going to do all this traveling and then I ended up staying at home. But anyway, I started doing some traveling, came back from a trip, saw a Reddit post that said, we're looking for someone who can write content about ham radio and do sick memes. And I'm like, well, I can't do sick memes, but I can write content about ham radio. So I wrote back, talked to James, had a really great conversation. He said, why don't you come on board as a writer? And so I started off as a writer, just working on, I forget if it was the general course or the extra course they had writing on, but that's what I was doing. I was writing course lessons. We got through that particular one. And he's like, well, I'm thinking about doing this or that. And wrote some other stuff for him. And he's like, have you thought about, would you like to try being on camera? I'm like, okay, why not? So that was 3 years ago. And ever since I've been kind of the face of the license courses, as we worked our way through refreshing all of them. And now we're doing some extra courses too. So we're in this period of 18 months where there's no changes to license courses. So we can go on and create some other cool things. Last year during the break from our license coursework, we created a course called HF Masterclass. Really, the idea here is where people who don't have access to an Elmer or just like to learn via online stuff, it's an Elmering way to get into HF. And so we get a lot of feedback from our folks, and they said, what can we do next? And they're like, we're interested in emergency communication. So this is where we started to come up with, but and I'm sure we're going to spend more time on that, but just my kind of ham radio bona fides things. I'm an amateur extra. I have been licensed for over 15 years. Worked all states, DXCC. I like to do HF. The last couple of years, I've really been into trying to get into some satellite work, particularly focused on ISS stuff. I don't have an astronaut yet, but I've got repeater contacts and APRS contacts and SSTV reception. So that's where I'm most interested in as far as ham radio stuff right now.
Well, awesome. And I was so excited when you guys came up with that HF class. That was just, I'm like, I said, and I told James when I talked to him about that, I said, do you literally read my mind? I mean, it's like, you guys, it's in what you, and I told him, I said, it's really so cool that you guys are listening to the community out there and responding and doing these things. And I told him, I said, well, you guys came along way too late for me because I had already taken my course. Now I forget who the course that I actually took. And the one thing that I really liked about it was, and I think somebody bought them out. I still think they're around, but they rotated the question pool, which I really liked. And it wasn't so,
Right.
what I liked about it was you didn't memorize the answers, you knew the answers. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a different, there's a big difference there. And
Sure.
and when I saw your course and I went in and I said, you know what, this is greater than sliced bread as far as I'm concerned. You guys just, James just had a great idea, ran with it, and it's just incredible. And then World Radio League, and James and I talked about that quite a bit as well too. So, but we got you here today for Emergency Communications 101.
Yeah.
And the timing was so appropriate, especially for us in the state of Florida. I mean, it was, we had Helene and then Milton right on top of that, and it was just one of those bam, bam, bam kind of a thing. So,
Yep.
let's take a walkthrough of that. Let's take a look and see, what this course is about, and how, say, for instance, somebody like me who's very interested in this, the benefits that I would get from it.
Sure. I'm glad to. So we definitely started from the ground up as far as what should be in this course. And part of it was, there's these groups out there, and every region has something different. Every town may have something different, right? There are some places that are really focused and engaged in Aries. There's other groups that are there are other places that are focused on races and use the races formula. And then there's even other groups, and here in Georgia, all the statewide folks are part of a group called Auxcom. So there's not one group that we could just sit down and say, hey, let's do a course and teach them how to get started in X, Y, or Z. So what we did was did a bunch of research to say, what are the common things that people need to know if they're going to join in these groups? And they end up being very similar, right? So all the groups are in some way affiliated with groups that work with FEMA. And so there are some basic FEMA lessons that people need to understand in order to join in with the groups. And Aries Races or Auxcom, all three of those require these two FEMA courses to have a certificate in order to be successful and really start off in their group. Another thing is, understanding basics of how just the radios work, right? So a lot of our students come out and they're new techs or new generals, but they've never touched a radio. They've never been on a net. They've never programmed a radio. So we felt like we needed to include all those things as well. Finally, we need to kind of get people aligned with what they want to do. Not everybody, MCOM is a lot of different things. It's not just Aries, right? It's Skywarn, and it's Mars for some people, the military auxiliary service, or it could be things like CERT and working with the community response team there. It could be things like Saturn for the Salvation Army, or working with the Red Cross. So we wanted to make sure we had a representative part of all these things. So those are really kind of the core things that went into it. Make sure we teach the basics, make sure the things we covered are relevant to Aries Races Auxcom membership, and then give people a broad opportunity to understand what the different pieces are in those groups. Then the last part talks about personal stuff. So in order to really be successful in being able to go off and help Aries for your community when the hurricane comes, you need to make sure your family is taken care of. So alternate power supplies, we spend a whole lesson on that. The ability, we spend a lesson on just personal communications plan. So my wife is not licensed, so I can't give her a ham radio and say, here, go forth and be ready to talk to me if the power goes out. But what I can do is give her a GMRS radio and get a GMRS license and do that. And so those are the kind of things that we say you need to think about in your personal communications plan. So really 3 sections: get into the basics of, just the mechanical part of being a ham and working on a net and those kind of things. Then there's more of a, what are all these groups do in different ways? And then finally, how do you take care of yourself?
Well, one of the things, Jim, that I found out after moving where we're at here in Florida, we don't have, just to let you know, and I got educated when I came down here because it was the whole reason I got into ham radio was because of this. All right. I found out, cell phone towers can go down. What are you going to do? And everybody said, you got to do ham radio. And that's how I ended up getting started in this. Now,
Right.
one of the things that just getting a little bit of a history lesson here, the building codes changed, probably 20 or more years ago in the state of Florida, that all new homes and new construction are concrete block. All right.
Okay.
And I mean, we're most homes are designed to withstand at least a cat 2, if not a cat 3 coming at you directly. And the trusses, they have straps around them around the block. I mean, it's very different. And then also too, we have hurricane shutters here, and that's mandatory. That's part of state law. And one of the other things that we did, and during the Jim and I before the show, I told him, I said, we have a Generac generator. We also had installed accordion shutters, and it's so nice. Literally took me 10 minutes to clasp all them. Now, one of the things with this home, and for most homes down here, we don't have wooden frames. We have metal frames. So that literally makes communication inside the house. And this is one of the things that I had some basic lessons that I did myself. I'm telling people, I'm going to say, look, you can have the best HT in the world, you can have the best signal stick in the world, but I'm going to tell you what, unless you're standing outside that door, all you're going to get is static. Okay, it's just not. You're not
Yeah.
going to be able to communicate. And I said, one of the things that I said during one of my shows that you know during that time the hurricane's actually going and in progress and everything, you really don't need to be communicating. You just need to hunker down and just stay in what I call your submarine, because all the windows are boarded up and it really feels like you're in a submarine. You just need to, and then when it gets to the point that the hurricane's gone past, that's the point that you actually need, your comms, and you need to do that. And that's
Right.
what I did was during Helene, after everything died down, I went out to my front porch and I visually verified through the peephole that it was okay. And I went out and I checked into our local net, and it was, I had no problem doing that and just giving a report for our area here. But I think a lot of people don't know. They're under the assumption like, oh, I'm gonna here I am. I have my ICOM 7300 and it's all plugged in. We're ready to go and everything. And I'm like, no, guys, you gotta understand that. And that's one thing. That's why I was so happy to see you guys come up with this class, because a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about emergency communications. And I think one of them is, well, you're supposed to be able to talk. Well, no, one, and it's drilled down to you when you live in the state of Florida, especially in our region. They don't call our hockey team the Lightning for nothing. We literally, we're not the Lightning capital of the world. I heard a place in Venezuela is, but I'll tell you what, we may be a close second. I'll tell you that. And I drill into people this. I said, you know what? When a storm is hitting, and when you're down here in this region, when a storm is hitting, okay, if you don't have a disconnect switch on your equipment, get one. Okay. And if you haven't disconnected, do it. Okay. Because I'll tell you what, it's going to get hit. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Done.
Right.
But again, getting back to your coursework here, I'm so glad. I looked through the contents, and I'm so glad you guys did it. And I really like what you told me here about, because there's areas in some areas, there's races in some areas, and you guys did the genius thing. You looked and you got all the pieces and parts together, and you saw what was common, what the common thread was throughout this. Just for reference, for our folks watching, how long will it take someone on the average to complete this course?
So there's 5 hours of videos in this course. This course has more videos than any other that we've done, including our license courses. So 5 hours at a minimum if you just watch all the lesson videos, and that covers 19 lessons. I have to remind myself here, 19 lessons. In addition, there's quizzes and things that they can do to enhancements in there. So for instance, not only are we teaching people how to program an HT, but we've got some worksheets. So you can make sure that when you're going off to program the HT on an FM repeater, that you're making sure you're getting the right information, which includes, the receive frequency and the offset and the CTCSS or DCS and the shift and those kind of things. Because if you don't have just one of those parts, it won't work for you. So we want to make sure that all that is in there. We've got a section that talks about managing power, and you really kind of hit on the fact of how important having power is. And it's going to be different for different people. I got family over in Eastern North Carolina. They have a Generac as well. But for other areas, I know people who just kind of have, gas start power generators to get them through, or battery arrays, or now, solar panels and power walls are an option as well. So I know there's a lot of different options out there, but what people don't think about is, how do you figure out exactly how much let's just focus on battery capacity. How much battery capacity do you need for a hour, day, whatever? So a lot of our lesson on managing power talks about how to calculate your battery capacity to go out or to include things. So we've got a multimedia battery calculator out there that allows you to say,
Wow.
all right, I'm going to plug in some radios and some accessories and what kind of things. All right, that means if I want to put all this together and have 5 hours of operating time and another half hour safety factor, I need to have X. And in this case, like I need 70 amp hours worth of battery power. So being able to figure those things out is something that is not intuitive, that we've put in to kind of help people get through that.
That's fantastic. And I did, a part of my videos, and I don't know if you've come across it. I got everybody like poo-pooed me. I said, I got a rig runner, and like, what'd you get that for? What are you doing that for? And I said, I'll tell you what. All right, it served its purpose because not only, for example, I can hook up my 705 to it, which is that's primarily what I use it with, but and I did, and I have a friend who used to be the manager of the HRO in San Diego until they closed. I'm really good friends with him. And he gave me a formula like that as far, for battery capacity, which it literally changed my world. Being able to figure that out. And what I did was I bought a battery big enough, a LiFePO that's big enough, on one end. Had to buy I had to go to a company called Power Queen to find a special charger for it, because and that's one thing that I'm doing a new video because I had a battery sent to me, and that's one thing that I kind of drilled going to drill in the video is you need to buy if for that specific battery, you need to buy that specific kind of charger. Okay, that's just, there's no two ways about it. It's like I realize it's going to cost $60, but you're gonna be able to charge it correctly, and it's good quality. And I ended up doing that today, and that's one of the things.
Great.
Ahead of the storm, and I do this all the time. Is I have my 4 HTs are all charging up. I have 2 batteries for my 705; those are charging up. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Bio-NO batteries. They're all charging up. So my room looks like a Christmas tree in here with all the lights going on and everything, and getting all of that ready. One of the things, you mentioned, I really like that you talk about programming the HTs. And I think that's so important because a lot of people just, they're like, oh my God, what do I do? I got the frequency, I got to set offset and everything. Believe it or not, I had a company called Radtel. I don't know if you've heard of them or not. They've sent me a couple of HTs. one of the things that I like about their HTs, and it's, they probably are ones along the line of the Baofungs, probably have spurious emissions, that type of thing. But one of the things that I really like is you download their app on the phone, and when you sign onto your app and you hook it up to the radio via Bluetooth, it finds the repeaters in your area, the offsets, everything, and you just hit. So, you pick the ones that are in your area, and it loads them on the phone automatically. It's done.
What was the name of that?
They're Radtel. I'll email you a link.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds interesting. We do, and part of the reason I'm asking is, we are getting. Last year we did a top 5 handhelds video, and we're getting ready to update it, and so that would be something to look into as a possible option.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it because it was like, oh my gosh, I could not believe how easy it was. And then, conversely, I have a Yaesu FTD5, and I bought the software to go ahead and upload it via the cable, and it works fine. I mean, it absolutely worked fine. But this through the Bluetooth with the app, I mean, it was like boom, 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 and it was done. It was great.
We had a couple of, so I've done a little MCOM, and when I say that, it's mostly like helping out with the big Peachtree Road Race here in Atlanta, being in net control, being on the race line, those kind of things. But we were able to consult with a couple of folks who are with Aries groups and other search and rescue groups, and ask them kind of what radio should somebody have to get started. And they're like, they don't need to spend a lot. They probably should spend a little bit more than a Baofeng. So I mentioned that top 5 radio handhelds video. We went back and kind of looked and said, what's in that we would recommend? And we ended up recommending the Yaesu FT65. And it's 2 meter 440 single VFO, so it's a really simple radio, but you can get a whole setup which includes antenna, spare battery, headset or speaker mic, those kind of things, for about $200, which is really reasonable. It's all supported by Yaesu. They have programming software, so it really kind of felt like the right package for us. We not only did we kind of say, here's an option, but then we built our couple of how do I program my radio around that particular radio, which to me, and I've programmed, I got 13 handhelds up here behind me, so I've programmed a bunch of radios, and it's very typical of the things you go through when you try and program a radio. So I really feel like this was a good option for us as far as getting people to understand. And worst case scenarios, somebody wants to go out and buy a Kenwood, THD 60 or 75. Great, go ahead. A lot of the same, you're still going to need to know what a CTCSS is and a VFO versus an MR key and all those kind of things. So all those basics apply to even if you move on to a bigger, better, fancier radio.
That's great, Jim. That's absolutely fantastic. And I think a lot of people, that's the first thing that they get so bogged down with is, well, I need to have equipment. What do I do? And you guys handle that. And you handle that like in the HF class, which is absolutely fantastic. And you're doing that here. As far as, say like with Aries and races and things like that, you mentioned a little bit about FEMA and their connection with that and having to take some FEMA courses. Do you guys actually walk through that and help people with that?
Yeah. So there are two, we spend a lesson on this and it ends up being a pretty long lesson. There are 3 FEMA things that both Aries and Races want you to have. And it's a little certificate you get from FEMA as part of their entry level participant level. And it's called IS 100C, which is an introduction to what they call the incident command system. So it's basically how they organize at an event or during an incident, whether it's an emergency or just a parade where they need to have a lot of cross-functional people involved. So that explains how that works. And it's important not just because um, it's really educational, but as you get started and move up, because a lot of people who are doing this are going to want to move up in areas of races and be a leader or their local city person. This is the stuff that you're going to face as a manager, getting involved in areas and being a regional leader is you're going to be interfacing with all of these forms and all of these systems. So getting a good start on what they are is really kind of foundational. So IS 100 helps you understand the incident command system. And then there's IS, I don't want to say the wrong number here because, FEMA and numbers and government and those kind of things. So let me get the right thing in front of me here. IS 700B is the other one, and that is the broader explanation of the National Incident Command System. So, that is really probably more for local and state emergency managers. That's probably who it's designed for. But I always found in my career, if I know what the boss is thinking and the things that the boss has to go through, I'm a more effective person on their team. And so knowing these things, I think is really helpful. The last thing, as far as FEMA goes, is something called the IS 213. And what the IS 213 is it's a communications form. So it looks like an email, but it's a standard form that allows you to give the same feedback and the same information that that they would be expecting in a certain way. So standardizing the way you send the message helps standardize the way the message is handled, and that's the third part of that kind of 3 elements of FEMA things that you need to know.
That's great. That's fantastic. I mean, you guys are,
Right.
and when I look through the course, I'm like, you've covered just about everything, and one question that I want to ask right now, you do go into digital, which I think
Yes.
is fantastic. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
So yeah, so we decided when we went into digital that we were going to focus on WinLink. And perfect tie-in, right? If you open up WinLink to send a message, what are you going to see? You're going to see an ICS 213 form, which looks just like what you'd use with FEMA. So it's all working together here. And why we chose WinLink is based on our research and experience that we did with the Ares deployment in Puerto Rico for Hurricane Maria. So, as we were going through the different groups, one of the things that I felt was really important is to make sure people had an understanding of what the group does. And a lot of people, hey, I want to help when all else fails. That's their motto behind getting involved in amateur radio. We had a perfect example by looking back at Hurricane Maria of what that meant to actually pack a bag and go for 21 days and deploy to help out in the wake of a storm. And so we did a lot of research on that, and we were able to talk to people who deployed there. We were able to kind of watch videos and get their stories. We were able to look at stuff that the ARRL put together. And the big thing that came out from 2 of the people that we were able to hear from was WinLink was key because they, and just I'm overly simplifying it here, but they had a net control in San Juan, and then they deployed 10 people out to remote fire stations and hospitals. And they got traffic back from those fire stations and hospitals saying, we need this, we need that, we need help. Well, a lot of those people out in the field spoke Spanish, and a lot of the people at net control did not. So that ran into some issues right there. But imagine, if you will, a detailed list of supplies that some local regional hospital needs to get back to the FEMA group. What's the best way to send that? Well, it's probably not going to be CW, and even voice is challenging, right? If you're using digital, you're not going to use FT8. You could possibly use PSK31, but WinLink was really the right solution. And they used it a lot and said that it was a big dependency for them. So we spend our time in the course getting you set up with Vara and WinLink to help make sure that you're aware and able to use the tools that people actually use during an event.
That's fantastic, Jim. That's an excellent example on a great use case for that, because places needing specific supplies like a hospital or maybe a fire station, and you really hit the nail on the head. A lot of times things can get lost with voice and CW. I mean, God bless those who do CW. I'm not one of them. It takes a long time to get messages out that way, and things can get lost in translation. And that way with WinLink, that just sounds like that was just a home run, what you guys did right there.
Yeah, and I think it was really cool if you think about it that the folks in Puerto Rico had the foresight to understand we need these remote stations ready and available if something happens. So the stations were mostly set up, even though they sent, ARRL and the group that deployed sent a lot of gear. The stations were mostly there. So the opportunity was then, how do we get how do we get the messages back? And the good thing about WinLink was, while they had resources in San Juan, messages could go on WinLink, and they didn't necessarily need to go immediately back to San Juan. So if propagation was such, it could send messages to a WinLink station in South America or Central America or USA, and it would eventually get back to the San Juan WinLink group. So that was really productive as well, and being able to kind of leverage propagation and those kind of things as well.
That's fantastic. Got a question here in the chat, which I thought was pretty interesting, and that's why I put it up on the screen. If I ask a question, if you have Q&A later, hear from YouTubers who survived in North Carolina. They recommend getting an analog scanner to get up-to-date info when the grid is down. What are your thoughts on that?
I like that. I think a digital scanner would be better, but money being what it is, if you could have an analog scanner, that I was amazed and super impressed by the folks who in Western North Carolina basically set up on the Mount Mitchell repeater and spent their days helping coordinate and share information as far as where roads were out, getting supplies into people, doing health and welfare messages, and making sure, hey, can somebody go check on grandma? Nobody's heard from her for 4 days because her power's out, and doing those kind of things. So I remember hearing on a Sunday night that here was the net, and this was, I think, 2 days after the hurricane hit. Here was the net. They were going on. They already had 200 health and welfare messages in queue, and I'm like, damn, that's something. So why do I say digital and analog? Analog will get you most of the ham repeaters, which is where a lot of us are talking, but with a digital radio, digital scanner, you could potentially hear other groups that are using digital encryption. So if your local police and fire and city people are using P25, which is a digital standard that some use, you could potentially tap into that and not only hear what's going on from your from the hams, but you could potentially listen into some of those other county calls as well. So that's why I say digital if you're interested.
That's a real good point, Jim. And I wanted to ask you, I don't know a lot about scanners, but from what I do know, Uniden makes probably the gold standard as far as scanners are concerned.
I'm going to reach over here because I need to unplug. Hang on.
Okay.
Scanner. Uniden scanner right here. It's connected up to an antenna, but yeah, I've got one here in the shack. So it's a Uniden scanner. I'm not endorsing any brand, but their Uniden does a really good job. This is digital and analog, so I can actually sit here and I do listen to my town's police department and understand, what's going on. We had a lot of rain during Helene here. We had 11 inches of rain, and I'm probably 500 yards from a creek that likes to flood. during heavy rains. So being able to listen into the police and understand what was going on there was super helpful. So just one option here for, I'll plug that in later. So just an option of an opportunity there. And we've got I'll go back to talk about the course. While we didn't talk as much about scanners in the course, we did talk about the personal communications things and things like having a weather radio, just a crank up weather radio that you can listen to AM, FM, and hear from your local stations that talk about what's going on from a news perspective and monitor the National Weather Service. So you can go out and buy those, and they're not that expensive. And you don't need to have a battery because they just, wind them up and away you go. And I've got a couple sitting over here that I can't reach, but it looks like you're getting one that's very similar to, yeah, I got something very similar here. So they're not really expensive, and you can charge them, use a cell phone charger to charge them too if you want when the power's on. But just it's a handy little thing. And so we get into those kind of things in our personal comms section as well.
That's fantastic. And, and that's I'm glad the gentleman brought that question up about the scanners, which is a good thing. And I think,
Yep.
It's always good to have a lot of tools in your arsenal. And I was talking to Jim before we started today, and I told him when we went through Milton, one of the things that we experienced not only was our cell phone service ended up going down, but the internet went down, and getting any kind of communications out, I literally had to drive at least 5 miles down the road to get a cell phone signal, to be able to let loved ones know, yeah, we're okay. Don't send the army after us. We're doing fine. So it was kind of frustrating. So what I ended up doing was, and let me go ahead and show everybody this. I got this Garmin InReach here. And the one thing that really kind of sold me on that, and I saw some reviews on YouTube, there's another one that's a touchscreen. This isn't a touchscreen. This has that keypad type of thing here, which I'm not really fond of. But somebody told me, the app will work on it in conjunction with this. So you have the ability to be able to send out 30 pre-recorded messages on here to people you designate. You can do that in in the contact section here, and it doesn't matter. What's better about this than, say, like the iPhone and their satellite technology? This works anywhere in the world, because I did read, like, the Apple satellite technology doesn't work everywhere in the world. There are certain spots in certain areas that doesn't have coverage. This has that coverage, and it uses that Iridium technology, which is fantastic. And the plan that I'm going to be on is going to be like $24.95 a month, which I think is a bargain on this too. And it also has an SOS feature on it. And every time you send out a message, it lists the exact latitude and longitude within probably about, a half meter of exactly where you're at. So this is another tool that it's everybody talks about, having your carry-on, having your HT. This is going to go with it. And this is part, because I want to be able to communicate no matter what. And the batteries on this, one nice feature about it, but he said it will last up to 14 days when it's on. So
Nice.
That's pretty amazing. So I was real impressed and very sold on that.
I have there's a lot of good personal emergency stuff like that out there now. I think that's one. And I have a friend who likes to go mountain climbing, and I'm like, how are you keeping in touch? How what do you do if you fall down on a rock and break your leg while you're 13,000 feet up? And she showed me that she had something similar to that. So that was exciting. I got into a little bit of a jam a couple of years ago. I love going up to the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina and just beating around and doing things. And I was out for a walk, and I'm like, I'm not feeling that great. And I got no cell phone coverage. And, I ended up making it back okay, but it was, I wasn't comfortable with that. So as soon as the iPhone came out with their SOS functionality, I upgraded just for that reason. I'm like, honey, I never want to be out of contact again. And so it's got this, basically ping the satellite with a short message that you can do. And I think that's great. And I think a lot of them are a lot that's expanding more and more. I've heard that T-Mobile and Starlink are working on a thing now where a lot of their phones will do that. So it's going to be more. So as you grow into your next cell phone, that's probably going to have SOS technology that uses the satellites to do that.
Right.
So
I had
pretty
heard
excited
that
about that.
Android's going to upgrade for that as well, which is very welcome news. And you mentioned Starlink, and one of the things that I found out, my wife and I are currently looking into this right now. If you were affected by either of the hurricanes, Starlink is giving you free service through the end of the year, which is $120 a
Oh
month.
yeah, that's great.
So we're gonna check that out because that's pretty much what we pay for our internet service provider anyway. And
Mhm.
the thing with us is we live in an HOA, so oh, I have all, and I bent James's ear last time that I talked to him in person about my HOA, and oh, that just you want to get instant frying egg on my forehead. Talk to me about my HOA. It's just
So I've been looking at houses. Mentioned my in-laws are kind of in that area that's northeast of Gainesville or northwest of Gainesville, and my wife and I have been looking for houses so we can maybe come down and join the in-laws. And we have had and we just both of us are like no HOA, no covenants that say what we can do with our house. And it has taken a ton of opportunities out of reach for us because we're strict on that rule. And I want to be able to make sure I can do what I want with the house. So
I don't blame you.
it's really slowed things down. But
Ha,
we're
I don't blame
we'll,
you at all.
we'll get there. We'll find something.
We'll see. One of the things for me is I don't have a permanent antenna outside because of this.
Yeah.
Now, they will allow a 20-foot flagpole, and there's my saving grace. And we have the biggest lot out of 500 homes in our development. We have the biggest lot. We live in, basically, it's like, I call it a twin single. It's what used to be known as a twin single, but we
Okay.
have the lot on the side. We probably have like at least 75 to almost 100 feet from this side of the house to the street, to the cul-de-sac over there. And
Mhm.
it's a perfect area to put in an antenna. But the big problem is in Florida is, a lot, we have irrigation pipes running through the grass. So, my problem is, I can get a 20-foot pole set up, and I can get HOA approval on that and get an antenna going. But my problem is running coax from the antenna over to the house and not
Right.
interfering with the irrigation ditches and irrigation pipes. And I want to bang my head against a concrete wall every time I think about trying to workarounds for it. And
I'm sorry to
I'm
hear that.
yeah, it's just kind of frustrating on that end. So but to kind of wrap things up here, you got, and this is just me. Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fanboy of you guys, but in the best way possible, because as I told James when I saw him in person, I said, if I would have designed a coursework to tell people about and get licensed in ham radio, I would have done exactly what you did,
Great.
because I told him, I said, it's scary. I said, we may be related because I have the same kind of mindset that you do, in thinking logically and things. And the greatest joy that I get every day, I'm pretty active on X or Twitter. And one of the things that I see out there every day is that one of the great things I think you guys do is every single day, somebody who's passed and gotten their license, there's a picture of them out there, and I gotta say, it's just so good to see that. I love that. And I told James that. I said, it's something so simple, but yet, people love recognition. And I think one of the things that I always tell people, whether you're a technician, a general, or an extra, you've done something fantastic. You've done something that not a lot of people have done. You are a ham radio operator, and I think that's fantastic. And congratulations to you for doing that. And
Yep.
that's I told him, I said, I can't say that enough.
The best part of my job, as an instructor is not writing the courses or sitting in front of the camera and reading off about, EIRP or those kind of things. It's when we get to go out to the Hamfest and James basically says, all right, go talk to the people who have been successful. And I get to do that. And just the smiles on their faces that they get from achieving a goal that they had. And, hey, maybe someday I'll do ham radio, right? We have helped facilitate that goal. And they just get the biggest smiles and are so happy that they're getting to do the things that they want to do. And that's the amazing part is just the feedback that, hey, thank you for helping me do something I always wanted to do. And hopefully, the license courses are the first part, but hopefully we now are getting them into even more about ham radio. So, I really felt like that if you go back 18 months with what we were doing before we introduced the master class, the HF master class, we were in this position, and James and I would both talk about this, that we're getting people licensed, but we're not getting them active. And, it's kind of like, well, congratulations, you got your driver's license, but we're not really going to let you use the car. What's the good of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want people to be licensed and active. And we get, and James and I were looking at a Reddit post the other day, and there was a guy who came on and he said, listen, I've been licensed 2 months and here's a bunch of things I learned. And one of them was, there's just not the right information in one place to help me understand to do what I want to do. It's all this tribal knowledge. And, if I talk to this Elmer, he's good at Morse code, but he may not know about antennas, and so on and down the road. So if we can help bring some of that tribal knowledge together for people to do what they want to do, we're going to be successful. So we've got the HF Masterclass for people who said, well, I got my ham radio because I want to talk around the world. And we got the emergency communications course for people who said, hey, I've got my ham radio license because I want to help my community. We're working on something else now. And I don't know if James wants me to completely announce it, but basically the idea is, how do we just give somebody the 10-mile wide view of ham radio so they can then find out the right places to go to say, I want to be a satellite op, or I want to be a Morse code. I want to learn Morse code, or I want to do, digital. And I'm just really into digital, or I got into ham radio because I heard you could experiment, and, how do I do that? So we're working on something like that hopefully people will really be able to get into and say, all right, now I understand the things I can do better and where I need to go. So it's not going to teach them every single little thing they need to know, but it's going to help them get going in the right direction and be an active ham, instead of going, well, I got this license and I'm just, never really figured out how to program a radio. So I'll go on and, now I'll go get a Raspberry Pi or something. So hopefully we'll get more people active. And I think that's a big part of our hobby that we need to do.
That's fantastic. And, James and I had a talk, and I told him, the whole reason I named my channel the way it did, Ham Radio Basics, I always ascribe to the principle, and I learned this from my dad, just, the keep it simple, stupid kind of philosophy. And I try to carry it forward here, because one of the things, and I appreciate all the other YouTubers out there, and I know them, and I've met a lot of them as well, and they're all great guys, and they all have different niches and, things that they're interested in, everything. But my goal with this channel was just to keep it so simple. And, because you can get, and as you well know, you can get so bogged down in the minutia and things and everything. And I'm saying, look, okay, you know what? I'm not an electrician. I never will be an electrician. But you know what? Here's what you need to know for this. Okay. Here's what you need to know for that kind of thing. And that's how I approach things, because, you won't see a lot of, me doing a lot of QSOs on the air, because you know what? There are 10,000 videos out there of people talking all the time. Now, significant ones, like when I made my first contact on my 705, absolutely, things
Uh,
like that. I'm gonna do that.
I think
But
I have one of those videos out on my personal channel too, so I
yeah,
get it.
yeah, and that's one thing that I have. One of my good friends in Texas, he's the same. He's of the same mind. He says, you know what? I don't need to go out there and say, I've activated this park, and you want to listen to my QSOs for 2 hours. No, you know what? Great. I'm glad you did that. I'm glad you got it. You got your points or whatever you did. That's fantastic. But you know what? Not everybody wants to listen to something like that. And that's where you use some discretion with things like that. And that's why that's one of the things on my channel. You won't see a lot of that fluff. Okay. You're going to see meat and potatoes here. And that's
Right.
why you guys, and that's what I told James. I said, you're a meat and potato. I can tell you may not be a meat and potato kind of guy, but you are with the courseworks that you do. So,
So
hey,
let's get we've said his name a bunch of times. Let's give him some love. James Cribbs, KN4NEH, is Mr. Ham Radio Prep. He and his buddy started this company 5 years ago, 6 years ago or so. And now James runs it himself and keeps this stuff going and has expanded, and not only, keeps me going and has me create terrific content well beyond just license courses. He's been expanding into what we call the World Radio League, which is at its heart a logging software, but it's really a community as well. So people can go and start tracking their contacts and being engaged. And again, part of the strategy of getting people engaged and being part of a ham radio community as they kind of get their license. And I think he's got the right mix, and we're growing it together with me and some other folks. And I'm really excited about where we're at right now.
well, like I said, I can't effuse enough praise for what you do, Jim, for what James does, for everybody there, and also World Radio League as well. And I'm definitely going to look at getting some folks on from them as
Terrific.
well, and talk about that, because you know what, one of my wife's great sayings is knowledge is power, and
Mhm.
the only way you can, if you can get that knowledge, you'll be a powerful person. And, it's not always having cash in your wallet. It's knowledge. I think knowledge is much more important than having cash in your wallet, because that way, it enables you to do so much. And your coursework is stellar, Jim. I just
Thank you.
love it. I can't effuse enough praise for you, for the
I
coursework,
appreciate
for
it.
what James does, and everybody there. I met a lot of the folks during Hamcation. Actually, just a side note, we went to. It's kind of ironic. We went up to Dayton this year, and I was supposed to go last year, and right before that, I was at my mother-in-law's. I fell and I broke my left hand. So we had
Ah,
2 days. We're 2 days from going up there, and had to cancel our reservations and everything. Well, my children and granddaughters live up there, so it was like, oh, so frustrating. But this year we got to go up to Dayton, and one of the things, it just blew me away how many people were there. I was not, I was not. I go to Orlando's only about an hour away from me, so
mhm.
it's very manageable walking around there.
Right.
Going to Hamvention, oh my gosh, it's like a sea of people everywhere you go there. It
Absolutely.
was like
Absolutely. It,
it was crazy, but we had a great time. I
yeah.
absolutely
Good.
had a great time, and
Good.
um,
Good. I think, as far as I know, we plan to be back in Orlando and at Dayton this year. I do know for sure that in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it is now, November 2nd, we'll be at the Stone Mountain Ham Fest here in Georgia,
awesome.
which is a good, nice size ham fest that you can get around. So if you want to come out and talk to James or I, we'll be hanging out and more than happy to talk radio with all y'all, because that's what we do and that's what we love.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hang on a second here. I'm going to
Hey,
wrap things up
hey,
after the show closes. I want to thank
before you
you
do,
guys. I want to thank
can I
everybody. Go ahead.
before you do, can I just make sure that people are aware kind of where to find this course we've been talking about? So hamradioprep.com is our website. We also have the Ham Radio Prep app. And once you get to the website, you're looking in our courses, and it's Emergency Communications 101.
Yeah, I just dropped it in a link in the chat here as well.
Thank
and
you
I
very
got
much.
it, and it's in the description as well too. So just hang on a second here. And I want to thank everybody in the chat today. You guys had great questions. Thank you for that. This was just absolutely, this made my day. It's probably made my week since, everything that's been going on with the hurricanes and everything. Jim, we're definitely going to have you back. I'm going to get James back on. I'm going to get some folks from World Radio League on as well too, because I can't get your message out enough on what a great job you guys do. So kudos to you. 7-3s to everybody out there. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.